I think it would require a deep recession, but we could get a deep recession
Mm.
if policy continues to be very unfavorable. And I'm not just talking about tariff policy. We also have kind of this discussion of the Mar-a-Lago Accord, this idea that perhaps holders of treasury bills will be forced to roll their money over into low yielding long term bonds. I mean, this is crazy, right? The treasury market is the ultimate risk free asset. If we undermine the sanctity of the treasury market, then we're looking at a worse financial crisis than what occurred in 2008.
This was supposed to be the year.
Wait, you said we could. Sorry, Tim.
Hey, go ahead.
I remember living through 2008. I know you did too. And I just remember,
You talking to me?
Yeah, I'm
I
talking to
did.
you. I mean, Peter, we thought the financial market system globally was coming down. I remember not going to bed because headlines were crossing and it was like which Wall Street firm was being bought by whom and which one wasn't going to make it and so on and so forth and what the government was going to do. Say that again so that we understand kind of the heft of what you are saying.
The fact that the dollar is weakening now is very, very unnerving because the dollar is supposed to be a risk off currency. You buy treasuries when everything is going to hell, and that requires more dollars, and that pushes up the value of the dollar. The fact that the dollar is weakening now is telling you that increasingly investors are losing confidence in the US financial markets. And, President Trump wants a lower trade deficit. The mirror image of a trade deficit is a capital account surplus. Yeah, if foreigners decide that they don't want to hold U.S. assets anymore, that's going to drive down the value of the dollar. That'll make imports more expensive, make exports cheaper. That'll result in a lower trade deficit. But we're talking about something that will also entail a huge decline in stock prices and probably a financial crisis.
So not exactly making America great again.
Not quite, no.
It raises the question about how much damage can be done before you believe that Trump will reverse his policies, if that is something you believe.
Well, I think for one thing, we've already sort of passed the event horizon. I think at this point, it's going to be very difficult to avoid a recession just based on everything that's already happened. The economy wasn't that strong going into the latest escalation of the trade war. In February, real wage and salary income was only up 1% year over year. The CPI swap market is telling us that these tariffs could push inflation to well over 3%. We're potentially looking at negative income growth. That's going to be very difficult to maintain without the economy weakening significantly and spending drying up. So I think the outlook is quite worrying at this point, and it's probably too late to avoid recession. And I don't think that Trump is willing to reverse course anyway. He's been very, very clear, really for like 30 years, about how he wants to build this protectionist wall around the US. I don't understand where this groupthink came from, where people were just saying, oh, it's going to be a negotiating ploy. It's not a negotiating ploy. He wants something that resembles autarky.
Okay.
We're going to pick up on that, but we got to do a headline.
There's a headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal, and I'm going to work it into a question here. eToro is said to delay its IPO roadshow amid market volatility. Put that on the list of companies that we've heard from today or have been reported on putting their IPOs on hold. StubHub, Klarna, AdTech Group, MNTN, Insure, Integrity Specialty Holdings, Chime as well. Are you concerned that we're seeing financial conditions tighten too much right now? We could start to see some sort of panic or freeze?
Yeah, we estimate that easing financial conditions last year, mainly because of rising stock prices, added around 0.5 percentage point to growth. The fact that financial conditions have tightened, mainly because stock prices have fallen, credit spreads have widened, is based on kind of a very back of the envelope back of the envelope calculation will shave around half a percentage points from growth. And that's not huge, but the risk is that you get kind of in this feedback loop situation where stocks go down. That means people feel less wealthy. That means they spend less. So there's less sales, less profits, and even lower stock prices. That's what we often see during recessions. And I think that's what we're starting to see now.
You know, I'm looking at something I think you either said or shared with Market Watch, and this was around late March 21st, and that even though you had this outlook for the S&P 500 this year of 4450 by the end of the year, and I think when you compared it to anybody else, it was the lowest on the street, you did have 5 scenarios that could boost stocks this year. And you talk about the president, you know, walking back much of his tariff agenda, kind of caving to pressure from the market, and a few other things. Do you still believe that there are scenarios where the market could actually rally?
There's certainly scenarios, and I wouldn't be surprised if over the weekend there's some comforting words from the Trump administration. But that's not my base case. I think that probably the trade war gets worse rather than better because Donald Trump kind of had this, well, I'd almost say like naive idea in his mind that he's going to raise tariffs,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to force other countries to reduce their tariffs. Well, there's two flaws with that argument. The first flaw is that most rich countries don't actually have very large tariffs against the US and don't really have very large non-tariff barriers against the US. I mean, they have regulations. All countries have regulations, but they're not specifically targeted at US companies for the most part. There's going to be exceptions, of course. So there's not a lot that other countries can do anyway. And the second thing, which is more politically relevant, we've seen, this is certainly true here in Canada, that retaliation is politically popular. Donald Trump has single-handedly resurrected the Liberal Party, which was heading for a huge defeat in the elections. And so people are saying, well, wait a second, if we can get more votes by retaliating, we'll retaliate. And so we're not going to get countries acquiescing to Donald Trump's demands. We're going to get retaliation, and that could very well spark another round of tariffs.